I sit here in the dim living room of our childhood home, my hands still carrying the faint trace of her lavender hand cream. Heart hammering against my ribs as I hear my brother's car wrenching gravel in the driveway. How am I supposed to look him in the eye after what happened last night? God, it all started 3 weeks ago when his voice cracked over the phone, desperate, asking me to come home because Mom's cancer had taken another turn and he couldn't spare any more days from work. His wife, the beautiful nurse he'd married 2 years ago, she needed another pair of hands. I said yes before I even thought it through. The drive back felt endless, rain streaking the windshield like tears I hadn't cried yet. When I finally stepped inside the house that still smelled of old wooden medicine, she was there in the narrow hallway, fresh off a long shift. Her thin white scrubs clung to her in places where sweat had dampened the fabric, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. She reached up for a clean towel on the high shelf, and the hem rode just enough. I caught the smooth, pale curve where her hip met her waist. Heat flooded my face. She turned, offered a tired smile that made something twist low in my stomach, and said softly, "Thank you for coming. Your brother trusts you with us." Her voice was gentle, professional almost, but her eyes held bound too long. That was the first crack in everything I thought I knew about myself. Days started blending together in that careful rhythm of caregiving. Mornings meant helping Mom with her pills, fluffing pillows, coaxing down soft oatmeal I barely tasted. Afternoons, she'd come home from the hospital carrying that sharp antiseptic scent mixed with something warmer, faint jasmine from her lotion, I think. We'd move around each other in the cramped kitchen while I washed dishes and she brewed tea for Mom. One afternoon her body brushed past mine as she reached for a mug above the sink. The soft swell of her breast grazed my arm through the thin layers of cotton. I froze, water still running over my hands, pulse suddenly loud in my ears. She didn't pull away right away. Just murmured, "Sorry," with a little laugh that sounded breathless. In my head I kept repeating the words like a prayer I didn't believe anymore. She's my brother's wife. She's just being kind. She's family. But the warmth of that accidental touch stayed on my skin long after she'd left the room, like a brand I couldn't wash off. Evenings settled into something quieter. Mom would drift off early from the pain meds, leaving the house wrapped in heavy silence broken only by the ticking clock and our careful footsteps. She started changing into softer things around the house after her showers. Loose cotton shorts and thin tank tops that slipped off one shoulder when she moved. I'd catch myself watching the way damp strands of her hair curled against the nape of her neck, glistening under the low kitchen light. One night we folded laundry together on the couch, warm towels still carrying the scent of the dryer. Her fingers brushed mine when we both reached for the same folded sheet, just skin on skin for half a heartbeat. My breath caught somewhere in my throat. Electricity shot up my arm and settled deep, where it had no right to be. "This is wrong," I told myself, staring at the fabric in my lap so I wouldn't look at her mouth. "She belongs to him. She's your sister-in-law." Yet I didn't pull my hand back, not immediately. And when I finally did, the absence of her touch felt colder than it should have. She smiled at me then, small and knowing, or maybe I was imagining it. The air between us felt thicker, charged like the moment before a storm breaks. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Just proximity, just exhaustion making my mind play tricks. But every time our paths crossed in that narrow hallway, every time her jasmine scent lingered after she'd passed, the ache grew a little sharper. And now, with my brother's car door slamming outside, I wonder how long I can keep pretending none of it happened. How long before the secret cracks wide open and swallows us all? Mom fell asleep early again, the pain meds pulling her under before the sun even fully set. The house grew still around us, just the hum of the fridge and the distant patter of rain starting outside. She came out of the shower in those soft cotton shorts and a loose tank top, hair still damp, smelling like jasmine and warm skin after a long day. I tried not to notice how the fabric clung in places, how her shoulders looked relaxed for the first time since I arrived. We handled Mom's evening care together that night. I held Mom up gently while she adjusted the IV line, her body pressing lightly against my side for balance. The heat from her through the thin layers made my breath hitch. Her jasmine lotion mixed with the faint antiseptic on her scrubs, creating something heady that filled the small space between us. She laughed softly at one of Mom's sleepy mumbles, and the vibration traveled straight through me, settling low and unwelcome. Later in the kitchen, alone with the dishes, she leaned against the counter and said quietly, "Yuri's so gentle with her, your brother never notices those little things." Her voice carried a tiredness that tugged at something deep inside me. My throat tightened with guilt, sharp as a knife, and something far more dangerous stirring underneath. I kept my eyes on the suds, scrubbing harder than necessary, telling myself this was just shared responsibility, nothing more. My brother's calls came less and less, always short, always from the office with voices in the background. She started opening up during those quiet hours, confiding how the nights stretched long while caring for Mom, how lonely it felt even with me there. One rainy evening she put on an old playlist, that slow aching song from our family gatherings years ago. We sat on the couch reviewing Mom's medication chart, her bare thigh resting warm against mine through the thin fabric of her shorts. I could feel the heat radiating, steady and impossible to ignore. My pulse hammered in my ears as the rain tapped against the windows. Shess family, Shess his, stop this now. But my body betrayed me, leaning just a fraction closer without permission. The song wrapped around us like a secret, pulling memories of easier times into this charged moment. Her fingers traced the edge of the chart absently, brushing near my hand again, not quite touching, but close enough that the air between us felt alive, electric. She sighed softly, shifting so her shoulder grazed mine, and whispered, "It helps having you here, more than you know." The words hung there, heavy with everything unsaid. I swallowed hard, fighting the craving to turn toward her, to let the proximity become something else. The ache built slowly, like a storm gathering for I couldn't outrun. Every shared chore now carried this weight, every accidental brush of skin leaving traces that burned long after. I told myself over and over that it was exhaustion, that the house was playing tricks on both of us. Yet, when she looked at me across the dim room, eyes soft and searching, the hunger only deepened, pulling me under despite every warning screaming in my mind. And then, as the song faded into another slow track, her thigh pressed a little firmer against mine after Mom was settled for the night. The house felt heavier somehow, the quiet pressing in from all sides. We decided to open a bottle of wine, just to unwind from the long day of caregiving and worry. The first glass went down too easily, loosening the edges of everything we'd been holding back. She leaned forward on the couch, her posture softening in a way that made the neckline of her loose top dip just enough to catch the dim light. When she reached over to refill my glass, her fingers didn't pull away right away. They lingered there against mine, warm and steady, sending a spark up my arm that I couldn't pretend was nothing. "You've been such a help these weeks," she whispered, her eyes softer than they had any right to be, reflecting the candle we'd lit earlier just in case. I swallowed hard, the wine burning a path down my throat that did nothing to quiet the voice screaming inside me. "This is your brother's wife. This is crossing every line we both know better than to approach." But the scent of jasmine on her skin after her shower drowned out the warnings, wrapping around me like a pull I couldn't fight. My hand stayed there under hers a second longer than it should have, the heat between our palms building into something alive and dangerous. I told myself to move, to break the contact, yet my body refused, caught in the gravity of her nearness. The storm outside picked up then, wind rattling the windows as if the weather itself sensed the shift in the room. She didn't pull back either, just held my gaze with that tired, searching look that made my chest ache with guilt and craving all at once. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this alone," she said, voice trembling just a little, the words slipping out like a confession meant only for the dark. Before I could find any words to answer, the power flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging us into deeper shadow broken only by the single candle. We checked on Mom together by its flickering light, moving carefully through the hallway, our shoulders brushing in the narrow space. Her breathing was close, uneven, matching the erratic beat of my own heart. Back in the dark hallway, she turned to me suddenly, her form outlined softly against the faint glow from outside. I don't know what I'd do without you here right now." Her voice was barely above a whisper, raw with exhaustion and something deeper. Then she stepped forward, closing the last bit of distance, and our bodies came together fully for the first time, warm, solid, the press of her against me stealing every rational thought I had left. Her lips found mine in the darkness, soft and urgent, carrying the faint taste of wine and unspoken need. My hands moved on their own, sliding down the curve of her back, feeling the tremor that ran through her. Every warning in my head shattered like glass underfoot. The line we'd been dancing around finally crossed in this stolen, breathless moment. We moved quietly then, hearts hammering loud enough to drown out the rain, slipping into the guest room where the shadows felt safer. Clothes whispered away in hurried, careful movements, her skin warm and smooth under my touch, the texture of her hands roughened from endless shifts at the hospital contrasting in a way that only heightened the ache. She gasped my name softly as we came together, the sound blending with the storm raging outside, raw and vulnerable in a way that burned itself into me. For those few intense minutes, the guilt dissolved into pure, overwhelming need, her jasmine scent on her neck, the way her fingers clutched at my shoulders like I was the only anchor left in her world. It was over too soon, leaving us tangled and breathing hard in the aftermath, reality crashing back like cold water. She touched my cheek gently, her eyes glistening even in the low light. "We can never tell him," she murmured, the words heavy with the weight of what we'd just done. We dressed in silence, wiping away any trace, slipping back to our separate rooms as if the night hadn't changed everything. I stood under the cold shower afterward, the water mixing with the sting of shame and the lingering echo of pleasure that refused to fade. Mom slept on down the hall, peaceful and unaware, while the house carried on with its familiar creaks and sighs. But nothing felt the same anymore, the air thick with the secret we now shared. The next morning she moved through the kitchen as if nothing had happened, preparing Mom's breakfast with her usual gentle efficiency. Yet when our eyes met across the table, the heat was still there, simmering beneath the surface, pulling at me all over again. I replayed every second in my mind, the press of her body, the soft urgency of her kiss while pretending to focus on the medication list. Every caring touch we shared for Mon now carried this double edge, loaded with meaning we couldn't voice. Horror at betraying my own brother twisting with the overwhelming desire to feel it all again, to surrender to the pull that had only grown stronger in the light of day. As the morning wore on, her hand brushed mine while handing me a glass of water, lingering just a fraction too long, her fingers warm and trembling slightly. The storm from last night had passed, but inside me, it raged on, threatening to break everything wide open if we didn't find a way to contain it, or if we gave in once more. I stood in the hallway later that evening, the faint creak of the floorboards under my feet the only sound breaking the heavy silence. She moved past me toward Mom's room, her shoulder brushing mine in that now familiar way, close enough that I caught the lingering jasmine on her skin mixed with the sterile trace of hospital soap. My breath caught, the memory of last night flooding back and widened, her warmth still ghosting across my palms like a brand I couldn't wash away. We checked on Mom together, adjusting the thin blanket with careful hands that never quite touched. She leaned in slightly to smooth a strand of hair from our mother's forehead, and for a second her body hovered so near mine I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her breathing. "She looks peaceful tonight," she whispered, voice trembling just enough to pull at something deep inside me. I nodded, throat tight, fighting the urge to reach out and steady her the way she had steadied me in the dark. Back in the living room, the air felt thicker, charged with everything we weren't saying. She sank onto the couch, legs tucked beneath her, the soft fabric of her shirt shifting as she drew a slow breath. I sat across from her at first, then closer when she patted the cushion beside her, the space between us shrinking until our knees nearly met. "You've been carrying so much," I murmured, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her eyes lifted to mine, glistening with unshed tears and something far more dangerous. She didn't pull away when my hand rested near hers on the cushion, fingers almost brushing, the heat radiating between us like a secret flame. "I don't know how to stop needing you here," she said softly, the confession hanging between us, raw and vulnerable. Stein screamed to remember him, my brother, the man who trusted me enough to call me home. Yet my body leaned in despite itself, drawn by the gravity of her nearness, the way her breath quickened when our gazes locked. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, not moving, not crossing again, but the almost was everything, the way her lips parted slightly, the faint tremor in her fingers as they hovered near mine. Morning light filtered through the curtains too soon, painting the kitchen in soft gold. She prepared Mom's tray with steady hands while I watched from the doorway, heart pounding at how normal she made it look. When our eyes met across the table later, The flush on her cheeks mirrored the heat rising in mine. Mom's weak voice called from her room, pulling us back into our roles, but every shared glance carried the weight of what we'd hidden. Now the sound of tires on gravel cuts through the quiet, his car pulling up outside. I rise slowly, forcing my face into something calm, something safe. She stands in the doorway to the kitchen, her expression carefully neutral yet her cheeks scary, that faint telltale color. Eyes flicking to mine for a heartbeat too long. The jasmine scent still clings faintly to the collar of my shirt, a ghost I can't escape. He steps inside, keys jingling, pulling me into a quick hug that feels like betrayal wrapped in familiarity. Mom calls out again, frail but hopeful, and we all move toward her voice like nothing has shifted. But as we gather there, the air between her and me hums with unresolved ache, the pull stronger than before, whispering, what if we never find the strength to let go? What if this secret becomes the only thing holding us together while tearing everything apart?